That life.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the South Planning Committee today. You're not expecting a fire drill today. In the event that the alarm sounds, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Could I ask all members and everyone to switch off their mobile phones, please? In order for those watching the live stream, note who is speaking, with members and officers introduce themselves prior to speaking. To ensure the members of this committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting, and if behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. I will now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves, please. Starting with Ed, please.
Councillor Ed Foster, Shropshire Councillor for the Lowton Division.
Councillor Tony Parsons, Councillor for Basin Hill, Colin and Sock.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall, Councillor for Broseley.
Councillor Puffer, Councillor for Fleet. Councillor Christian Lee, Councillor for Bridge North East and Ascalus.
Councillor Hilary Love for Church Stretton and Craven Arms.
Councillor Nigel Lumbey for All Dryden. Andy Boddington, Ludlow North.
Gemma Gawley, Development Highways. Maria Howell, Housing and Neighbourhood Officer. Sarah Jones, Senior Planning Officer. Elizabeth Atwood, Planning Officer.
Nick Hickman, Councillor for Bay Valley Ward. William French, Principal Planner.
David Evans, Councillor for Bednar and Stretton, and also chair of this committee.
Louise Evans, Principal Planning Officer. Tim Brown, Solicitor.
Tim Ward, Committee Officer.
Thank you. Do I have apologies for absence, please?
We've had apologies from Councillor Robert Tyndall.
Thank you. To confirm the meeting of the minutes held on December the 12th, do I have a proposal for the minutes, please? Thank you, Tony. Seconder, thank you, Lily. All in favour? Thank you. Public questions?
No public questions, Chair.
Thank you. Disclosure of community interest, please. Councillor Love.
Yes, because I live in the ward of the one for Euro quality lands, I will be leaving the room on this.
Okay. Number 7, Euro quality land. I will declare an interest in that because I'm a local member.
Yeah.
Councillor Hickman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6, Hounds Facton, is in Ponsonby Parish. I sit on Ponsonby Parish Council. When this was discussed at Council, I took no part in the debate and abstained in the vote, so I will be basing my decision today just on the information given to us today.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else, please? Right. We now go to item number 5, proposed retail unit, south of Sheep Road in Ludlow. Louise, please.
You can go to the next slide. Yeah,
Yeah, so we've got site is located to the southeast of Ludlow. I can put that on screen. Adjacent to the A49 trunk road, and it's round about the Sheep Road as denoted by the star in this image. The site is currently in agricultural production, but forms the northwestern corner of an employment allocation in the development plan. Next slide, please. The proposed development will provide a retail unit of just over 2,000 square metres with access from Sheep Road. There will be a 160 space car park, a service yard and landscaping. The access road will be provided along the eastern boundary of the site and will be capable of serving both the proposed development and future development that may come forward on the remainder of the employment allocation. Next slide, please. Here we have the floor plan, a roof plan and a section plan of the proposed building. Slide, please. These are the proposed north and east elevation plans. This is a resubmitted scheme where the design was raised as a concern on the original submission. Officers have now worked with the agent and developer to secure an improved design, which now incorporates the use of buff bricks, darker cladding, and a multi-gable main elevation, which is more in keeping with its setting. The previous scheme was a white flat roof box. Next slide, please. Here we have the south and west elevations. We have received both support and objection from public representations in relation to design, but officers feel strongly that the current proposal is compliant with our policies in this regard. Next slide, please. We've just got a couple of visuals now that were provided with the application, just for you to be aware of. That'll be the view from the main roundabout. So with regards to some of the plan matters, this is a site from Canaan Camp, which members may be aware from the officer's report. The heritage impact assessment that was submitted with the application recognised a less than substantial harm to the significance of Canaan Camp and its visual relationship with Ludlow Castle and St Lawrence Church. So this is just a view you see, as we did point it out on site today. So whilst that level of harm has been recognised, the public benefits of the scheme are considered to outweigh the impact. So again, that's just a constraints map should we need to discuss any of the particular issues, but members will note from the officer's report that we have a proposed out-of-centre retail unit on an allocated employment site. The application deals with both these matters through the submission of a retail impact assessment along with a sequential test and information seeking to address policy MD4 with regards to the loss of the allocated employment land. All those matters are addressed in the officer's report to committee, and documents have been available for members to consider ahead of the meeting today. The officer's view that sequential test has been met, the proposal would not have significant adverse impact on the town centre, and there is sufficient justification for the use of the employment allocation for a retail scheme, given that there will be a creation of around 70 jobs and that the proposal would provide a catalyst for future development on the site, which has not seen development since its allocation. So the proposed development has been assessed against locally adopted policies and the national planning framework, and it's recommended for approval subject to the planning conditions with delegation given to officers to confirm the final wording of those conditions.
Thank you, Louis. Our next two speakers on this, Councillor Vivian Parry, please. And 3 minutes and that's it, please. 5 minutes, sorry.
Right, thank you. This is a hard one. I will say that. I've had some people for and some people for against, and quite a lot of people one way or the other, and they can't make their minds up. We already have a supermarket that came in 4.5 years ago, which was the new Sainsbury's store. And that is just about getting up to, how should I say, the amount of people that should be going in there. At one time, there was hardly anybody going in for at least 2 years. I wonder sometimes, because this is an M&S store, I wonder if it was another store, if it was another supermarket, whether it would have been thrown out before now. But because it's an M&S store, I think that we have quite a few people who go to M&S stores, go to Hereford, or they come to Shrewsbury, or they go to Kidderminster and use those stores there. My daughter is one of them, actually. But I feel that because of people working away, we needed the Sainsbury's store so that when people came home at night, they could nip quickly instead of coming into the town centre. Now, this isn't true with the M&S store. I must say this for them, though. When it came to the town council, we said to them that we didn't like the look. Well, I was one of the people that said that they didn't like the look of what they were going to build there. It looked like a box, and it really did. It was a mess, and it would have stood out like a sore finger, especially coming up the A49 and coming from Shrewsbury the other way, and also from the view from Clee Hill. So they have done that, and they've gone out of the way to do that. So I must say how I appreciate them doing it. We have lost the fruit basket in the town already, who decided that they couldn't compete with any more supermarkets. So that's one store that's going already. We have a lot of problem in our town centre with closed shops at the moment because they are in such bad repair, and we really should have a letter sometime from this council to say, can the people who own them repair them? Because we lost Costa Coffee because there were 3 or 4 holes in the roof, and nobody wants to take on shops that are in disrepair. I think that really, on the whole, people are asking for M&S because it is M&S. They're not asking for it, as I said, if it had been another supermarket. I'm not sure myself whether I'm for it or I'm not. But I'm glad that they've done all the things that they stated that they were going to do. So really, they have tried. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say to you as a committee, please make your own mind up about it. Do we really need another supermarket in Ludlow? That would make 4. I don't think we do, but it's up to you to make your own minds up. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Farrell, please? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I now call on Ian Kilby, the agent, please. I have 3 minutes to do the committee. Thank you.
Remind me which button.
Right.
Gertie, thank you. You've seen the site today. As officers have pointed out, this is a resubmission of a scheme that was withdrawn at officers' request earlier. And we've been working with the council officers since that time to address the issues that were highlighted at that point. These are sort of set out in your report. Number of key things that I wanted just to get across, that we have sought to work with the local community on this. We've had meetings with both the Town Council, Ludford Parish Council and the Chamber of Trade and Commerce to hear their views and sort of work with and understand what their concerns were. As a result of that, and you heard Councillor Parry say, the design has been significantly changed. This is the first of its kind nationally to have this design. It had to get sort of board approval from NS to achieve that. You had late representations raising questions about retail impact. I draw members' attention to the officer report where we were asked to undertake an updated retail impact assessment in only October last year. This included a household survey, as well as referencing the relevant national and local policy guidance. And it revealed some interesting factors, not least the factors Councillor Parry's already highlighted, the significant trade diversion from existing M&S customers out of Ludlow at the moment to the tune of around £20 million a year. So if you can keep that money in the local economy, it's a good thing. In terms of the technical impacts, we have worked with National Highways, your local highways officers. We've worked to address their concerns, and there are technical notes in support of the application that show how those concerns have been dealt with. There are no objections from Historic England. You saw the officer point out the views from Canaan Camp, and I'd point out also this is an allocated employment site, of which this would form a very small part. It's an allocated site that's remained undeveloped for about 8 years. This provides the infrastructure to get into the site and, as already been mentioned, 70 jobs. So we think on balance that we've dealt with all of the issues, or the issues that have been raised. All of the relevant planning issues have been addressed as part of this. And we would hope that the committee supports the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for you, please? Yep, Andy.
Just turn yours off. Yeah. That'll do. Okay. What happens when the car park is full? On the day before Christmas, the day before New Year, the day before Easter? Where does the overflow traffic go?
Hypothetical question that the car park is for. We've actually reduced the size of the car park at the request of officers because it's important that this be a sustainable site. The site, as members will know, is very well connected. There are footpaths and cycleways that connect you directly to the site. There's also a bus service that passes the site, and we're not a million miles away from the park and ride. So we would say that this is a sustainable location. Now, okay, this is at the edge of Ludlow on the eastern side as it stands, but you will know as the local members where all the housing growth is taking place, and it's a stone's throw from this side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Any more questions, please? Thank you, Ian. Really good. Right, Councillor Boddington.
Thank you, Chair. As you've said, this is one that's in the balance. However, I've thought a lot about this, and I think people will know my general opposition to out-of-town supermarkets. But as Mr. Kilby has just said, Ludlow is expanding. It's out of the centre, but we're getting a bigger town. And there are around 600 houses going up, currently on the outskirts. And none of us think there won't be any more, because there will be more. And it's just, it's a way of life. Until our population shrinks and we have fulfilled all our housing needs, then we'd like to have more housing in Ludlow, particularly as it's such an attractive location. Now, on the design, I have mixed views, and personally it's too tall for me. I would like a lower design. However, I have to say I'm in a total minority in Ludlow in that opinion. I have, as always, extensively trawled opinion through my blog and through social media, and almost nobody agrees with me. So not for the first time, I'm on my own. Therefore, I'm not making a design objection. I am concerned about traffic. Now, this is why I asked a question to Ian. But if we get overspeed traffic, and the car, I think that because there will be, they'll park immediately outside the access road on Sheep Road, because there's no double yellow lines and no restrictions. So what gets quite a dangerous situation, that people will be coming out of this junction and somebody will have parked very close to the junction and sight lines will be blocked. Traffic there, despite the speed restriction, can be quite fast. And so I think there's an issue there, and we really need double yellow lines outside, and I think that should be part of this application. We don't have to wait for SIL, because we have so many demands on our SIL money that we can't fulfil properly 1 in 10 of them. So we need those parking restrictions to go with it, and that would make this development, I think, acceptable in planning terms, along with one other matter. That we need a crossing across the road, across Sheep Road. So on the other side, you have the Eco Park, and you have the new development of Letwich Rise, Murchison Close, as it's called in some documents. So you have that new development. Big crossing. There'll be traffic turning out the junction, and there'll be more traffic on the road than there is currently. So I think we need a marked crossing there, several will do. It doesn't have to be anything too substantial, but we need that for safety. Again, I think we need that to make the development acceptable. Now, there have been other suggestions. The Chamber want a dedicated bus service. That's not necessary to make the development acceptable. In any event, the bus service is every half an hour. But for people getting off the bus, they will need to cross Sheep Road. So we need a crossing on Sheep Road, and obviously not parked vehicles, which would block the sight lines of vehicles and pedestrians. So we need improvement to that domain. Beyond that, I think I can find no real planning ground to turn this down. So I don't see that if we threw it out today, it would be overturned on appeal quite easily. And it's not one where I can stack up the grounds and say, yep, we're opposing this. I'm not totally certain at the moment I do oppose it. There is an impact on the town centre, but that's a small percentage, and it's only 1.8 million, only 1.8 million. That it will hit particular shops, and we do have an issue. I mean, there is a slightly more optimistic outlook than we heard from Vic, because the shops are going to be repaired and there are new tenants. But nevertheless, Ludlow's been hit hard by the pandemic, and a lot of businesses, survived for about a year, and then it went under because the footfall didn't come back. So I am concerned about that, but even then, I don't think it's enough reason to turn it down. That the town centre needs to come back on its own legs. And so as councillor of the town centre, I think that needs to be the case. So I surprised myself that some months ago, I would probably sat here opposing it. But having considered everything, taken broad opinion, that I think there are no great grounds for turning it down. And actually, we should vote for it.
Councillor Lott, please.
Thank you. I think Andy makes some very good points. I think there is going to be quite a few new houses built in Ludlow. It is growing. We were talking about that on the site visit, and another supermarket won't necessarily be a bad idea for the town. I accept there will be some impact for the centre, but on balance, it's probably a good idea. However, we did cross that road when we did the site visit, and that did cross my mind, the worry about the safety of the crossing the road. So I don't know whether there's any way we can bring in some kind of condition that there is a crossing put on, and I think the yellow lines is probably a good idea if we were able to bring those in, I think that would be a good idea. But otherwise, I would probably support. I think I'm leaning towards supporting this application.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Hutt, please.
Well, the local members given us pretty much a free hand. I do note the concerns from Ludlow Parish Council and Ludlow Town Council. I would probably refer back to my farming background. Do we need another supermarket? I'm not sure on that one. We've got to come up with a pretty darn good reason to reject it. I have got highway concerns. The sheep road coming in from Sheep Village connects to my division a short way out. It's relatively quiet. The additional housing in Sheep Village, the Eco Park, coming out of the roundabout junction, it's fairly quiet most of the time. The A49 is a busy road, and I've tried to come out there on numerous occasions and had to wait quite some considerable time. You've got traffic coming out of Ludlow Town via the Sheet, either wanting to go by Shrewsbury or Hereford. It is going to be an additional impact at that roundabout. I'm not sure what can be done. I do not want to see a situation where people are trying to jump out in front of traffic on the A49 with which to get out because they're in a hurry or for whatever reason. There are some concerns there. But like previous speakers, I'm not a lover of supermarkets. I'm a farmer, I guess, but they are a necessity. People want choice. And I don't think there is sufficient enough reasoning to turn it down. It is going to have an impact to a small percentage in the town centre. And for me, I think the basis of my judgment is pretty much going to be done on the officer's report and the thoroughness of it. So taking it into account, I'll wait and see what other members say. But I think if this committee is minded to reject it, you've got to come up with some pretty darn good reasoning.
Councillor Hickman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was important to listen to local members' views first. I'm not sure that I agree with the statement that it's up to us to decide when Ludlow's got enough supermarkets. It's not for us to decide, especially in a town like Ludlow that's expanding fairly fast, really. We'll see a lot more residential development in the next few years by the sound of it. I think it's good that it would provide up to 70 jobs, hopefully many of those for local people, or certainly in the near area. I think we can leave it to officers to set conditions regarding sale of any other goods in this store apart from food items. I think the highway access is good, and I do agree with Councillor Boddington regarding the risks of overparking near to the island. I think our officers could perhaps set that as one of the conditions, that we could have some double yellow lines joining that roundabout. I think the retail impact assessment I'm reasonably happy with, bearing in mind it's not an exact science really, because you've taken into account, as was mentioned earlier, things like customers who may have gone to Shrewsbury, Marks and Spencer's food would now use the Ludlow one if it's built. So I'm reasonably happy with the impact assessment. And the good access for cycleways and footpaths nearby, as we saw on the site visit this morning. Again, I'm happy with, so I'm minded to support this application.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was interesting to hear the views of both the local member and other members who represent divisions close by. And obviously the local member was in two minds as to this proposal, but the other two local councillors, I think, are, despite some concerns, are supporting the application. And I think we were asked to consider two things really, insofar as this application was concerned. That was the impact on other retail developments and this loss of the allocated employment land that as this land is already identified as being for different types of employment. But it's interesting that the applicant has looked at a number of other sites in the Ludlow area, I think 11 in total, and found none that were as suitable as this one. And obviously this will provide employment. We've heard about the 70 jobs. It's not the same type of jobs that would have been there if the site had been developed in a different manner. But I'm also thinking that I will be supporting this application, and I think it will provide something different to some of the other alternative supermarkets that are in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bagel, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in agreement with other councillors with regard to the need for some sort of crossing and perhaps even double yellow lines as well on that road. It strikes me as quite a fast road. Crossing it this morning wasn't as easy as it might have been. One of the things that struck me is that the design of the building, the change to the design of the building has made it not unattractive. And I think, given that it is very close to a number of industrial buildings, I think it will enhance the appearance of that area. The access with cycleway and paths and so on is also in its favour, and the fact that so many houses are before too long going to be built in the surrounding area means that they're going to need some kind of store. I'm minded to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you very much. I understand Councillor Boddington's concerns about the 160 car parking spaces, but with that amount of spaces, I would have thought there ought to be a reasonable regular turnover of spaces being made available for new shoppers visiting the store. I do understand people's concerns about perhaps the need for a crossing as well, which I think ought to be explored more, and with the proposed housing that's likely to come along in forthcoming years, I think there's no reason really why we should be refusing this application. I'm minded to support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Please.
So from a lot of councillors, we've heard about a crossing, which of course I'd support. So is there anything that we could do officer-wise or highways? We've got highways here now, because maybe we need to defer this to go away and rethink that there is a need for a crossing.
Yeah, maybe you go back on that, please.
I was just going to say, I can address the crossing first, but also there's a couple of other points that what needed sort of addressing as well, if that's okay. So if I just deal with the crossing element in the first instance. So the proposed access is showing an informal crossing point, so that would be a tactile crossing, not what we would call like a signalised crossing. I would suspect at this location a zebra crossing wouldn't meet the criteria because the approach vehicle speeds would be high, so we would be looking at a signal crossing here. I know it's a bit of a strange thing to say, but sometimes if there isn't sufficient sort of need for a crossing, it can actually be more of a kind of a safety hazard. So if there's less of a sort of demand, so we've had other locations where so when you install a signal crossing, you have to, there's supposed to be a kind of a calculation in terms of the number of pedestrians that are likely to use it. And if drivers get used to the idea that there's a lot of demand, then that can sometimes create more of a hazard than I think. So we've assessed the application on the basis that so they submitted a transport assessment which takes into account community development. So it takes into account the allocation to the north for the residential site, and we've assessed on the basis that we don't think a formal signalised crossing is required in order to make this site acceptable. But there is provision for the informal crossing within the access site. I don't know if you want me just to touch on a couple of the other points that was raised. So there was the issue with regard to the car parking levels. So ironically, the first submission came in with 180 spaces, and at that point we raised concerns because we wondered why the parking level was so high. And I won't use the word suspicious, but we didn't understand really why the parking level was so high. So the application that's before you today, there is a reduction in parking spaces for 160. I just wanted to quote from the submitted transport statement that's been submitted as part of this application. So basically what they did is a parking accumulation sort of survey, and it comes out that the peak outright car parking accumulation was shown to be 59 vehicles, that's 160 spaces would operate within capacity. So we're satisfied that the 160 actually is sufficient for this location. I think, as Councillor Boddington pointed out, that when we look at different sites, we look at the impact of the overspill parking and we make an assessment. So if it's close to kind of residential, then we look at the safety concerns. But obviously if it's on a primary route like the A49 or one of the more kind of strategic routes through Shropshire, we would then be more concerned about any kind of overspill parking. But for this application, we are satisfied that 160 spaces is sufficient, and also we would say that it actually is an oversupply on parking. So there is a balance to be had between the sustainable travel element of it and the over provision. But what we normally find is that the operator sort of informs the level of parking because they have a good idea of their customer base and the movements and when they're sort of likely to be using the store. So they want to make sure, don't they, effectively, that there is sufficient parking. They don't want to get a reputation for turning up at M&S and not being able to park sufficiently. So we're supportive in that respect. With regard to the TRO, the access details will be subject to a formal 278 legal agreement, and within that agreement there's a clause that basically says that the developer is required to cover any additional costs for a traffic regulation order, so it would be covered within that respect. So the works would be subject to a 12-month maintenance period, and during that period we would do monitoring, and before we issue the final certificate and sign everything off, would need to be an assessment. So if we do find that the parking is a problem, then we've got a mechanism to introduce a traffic regulation order through that. And then I think the final point that I was just going to address was from Councillor Happer with regard to the A49 and the junction. So I can't respond on National Highways perspective, but they have both local highways and national highways have reviewed all the transport assessment, and we're both satisfied that there isn't going to be a sort of a delay on their network. And as you may be aware, national highways are very they do scrutinise every element of it, and they're satisfied that there is no delay at the A49 as a result of this development. But I'm happy to take any further questions.
Number please. No, all right. Everyone good.
But if I could make a comment, then let's start recommendation. But firstly, thank you, Gemma. However, I think having seen what happened at Sainsbury's at peak periods, and Sainsbury's is not very busy. I mean, it's often actually really quite empty. But at Christmas, they were backing up all the way to the A49, and people were parked around the Roxgreen estate in Overspill, and people were queuing for 40 minutes to an hour to leave the car park, so you didn't get turnover. So that led to alfresco parking. And that's what really concerns me. And somebody going through, and okay, it's not a designated major route, but somebody going through on the Canaan Road, Sheep Road goes into Canaan Road, and somebody going through on that road, I think would be tempted, because there's no WL lines, to just stop outside, quickly pop into M&S rather than worrying about parking, and grab your sandwiches, a pie for supper or whatever. And that does concern me, and I really think this needs looking at. Now, I wouldn't like to defer the application. I would prefer to approve it, but we make a recommendation that we defer to officers the issue of the crossing, and I would need to see more evidence before I quite accept this argument that it's not suitable for a crossing. I mean, I speak as a pedestrian, and as a pedestrian, it needs a crossing. There's no doubt. So I think we should approve it, but with the recommendation that we defer to officers discussions on a crossing and on waiting restrictions. And I hope that Mr. Kilby can be generous in provision. I see Ian nodding there, and I think this will make development acceptable. And I think I could sell it on that basis. So if we can make that, that condition on our approval, and if something satisfactory can't be agreed, then it should come back to us. But I mean, in the normal course of business, we don't have applications coming back to us that we basically agree with. So that's proposing.
Okay. Can we read or you all right?
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm happy for you to give delegation to us to come up with a wording of a condition, to deal with that matter. But as I said, the conditions will need to be agreed with the agent prior to determination in any case. So I can certainly have those discussions and find wording of a condition that would satisfy that.
Right. It's it, something new for Ludlow. It's Marks and Spencer's. We hear a lot about Sainsbury's and the traffic and the parking before Christmas. But what you're going to realise that Sainsbury's, they got an Argos. And a lot of people do Argos shopping. And they go to Sainsbury's to collect it. My son uses it quite regular, so I know. So Argos is bringing extra people in at Christmas to collect goods from Argos. But Marks and Spencer's, they're not having a cafe in there, so it's not going to be taking trade out of the eating places or the cafe shops in Ludlow to coffees and all that sort of thing. I was naturalised anything. I was England have done their research, obviously, else they would be jumping up and down, making noises, and I'm sure it satisfies them. And the site, as I say, it is an employment site. It is going to create jobs. And in time, there's obviously other people and outlets going to go on this. There'll be more jobs for Ludlow. And I can't think it's going to take people from out of town. I think it's going to bring people into Ludlow. They'll come into Ludlow to look at Marks and Spencer's. They might even go into Ludlow and say, right, let's go and have a coffee, let's go and have a look around and everything else. So I think the football into Ludlow could increase rather than decrease. And so therefore, from the chair, I'm minded to second Andy's proposal. You're making a firm proposal?
Yes.
That we sort of accept the recommendations and monitor the movements of traffic, and then we can delegate to officers and looking at a zebra crossing or a crossing into the eco park at a later date once everything is bedded in. Is that right?
No, I think that they need to look at that now.
Okay.
And we have that in front. And while we're talking directly to the promoters of the scheme, and so I think we do that now.
Okay.
And then there will be the 12 months monitoring anyway that goes on.
Okay. So you're recommending the approval with looking into the aspects of a crossing the eco park. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to second that proposal. So would you like to take the vote, please, Kim?
Okay, so we've got proposal and a seconded to grant permission subject to conditions as set out briefly in Appendix 1, and to defer to officers' discussions in relation to the crossing and the weighting restriction. Yep. If you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall. For. Andy Warrington.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Helen Miller. For. Nigel Lumbey.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous. For.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good. Right, we now will move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the hare and hound cocktail. I believe Sarah, please.
Chair.
Thank you.
This application is for the erection of 10 dwellings on land adjacent to the Hare and Hounds former public house, which is in the process of being converted into 4 dwellings. First slide, please. It's put forward as a cross-subsidy scheme for 4 open market houses and 6 discounted market sale homes, which are affordable housing as defined in the SPD. Next slide, please. And the next one, please. Thank you. The discounted market sale homes are to be discounted at 20% below the local market value secured by Section 106 agreement. The site is located within the open countryside to the north of the B4386. Next slide, please. So that's the terrace of 4 of the affordables. Those are 2-bed. And next slide, please. Those show the internal arrangements. Next slide, please. And those are 2 affordable semi-detached properties, 3-bed. Next slide, please. And that's the internal arrangement. Next slide, please. And then we've got the 4 detached dwellings. Those are the open market, completely open market dwellings. Next slide, please. That's internal arrangements. Next slide, please.
This Google image shows the location of the site in relation to Crupton, which is a tight-knit settlement, which is not identified as a community hub settlement or a settlement which is part of a community cluster. Next slide, please. That just shows further out, so you can see Crupton down in the corner there. The site, if you go, that's it. Well done. So it's that triangular portion of land there. This next slide, please. Some photographs of the site. This is the access looking west towards the junction with Crupton. Next slide, please. That's looking sort of northeast into the site. You can see that they've started work. That's into the site looking towards the access. That access is being built to adoptable standards. Next slide, please. That's the conversion of the former public house that's taken place to 4 dwellings. Next slide, please. That's just further along. Next slide, please. That's into the site where the 4 open market dwellings would be built. Next slide, please. Again, that's looking into the area where the open market dwellings will be built. Next slide, please. Right, sorry, one. That's it. Can we go back to the application layout? That's probably the best. Thank you. The public house has previously been identified as a non-designated heritage asset. Officers consider that the design of the dwellings are acceptable and the scheme layout, which follows the existing pattern where it runs parallel to the road, reflects the general position of historic lost building ranges. But extending the development into the undeveloped land to the rear of the site would have an urbanising impact, which would adversely impact on the setting of the non-designated heritage asset. That's a less than substantial harm in NPPF terms. Therefore, the committee must weigh the public benefits against the harm. Exception sites are permitted in locations that would not normally obtain planning permission for new housing development on the grounds of local need. There are several ways in which affordable homes on exception sites can be delivered, which include cross-subsidised schemes where discounted market sale dwellings are used to subsidise affordable rented dwellings. The scheme here is not in accordance with the SPD as set out in the officer report. Access arrangements are acceptable. Drainage, ecological interest, trees and compensatory landscaping can be covered by conditions. Overall, whilst there is a need for more affordable homes, we accept there's a need for more affordable homes. However, this is not considered to be an appropriate location as it lacks the close relationship with the settlement and would harm the open countryside and setting of the non-designated heritage asset. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, now some speakers on this one. Mr. Alan Odgett. You're speaking on behalf of Oswestry Parish Council, I believe. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you. The right-hand button on the loudspeaker. Okay. Thank you.
This application would be a waste of everybody's time unless it is within or adjacent to Crupton settlement. Fact, it is. Why? Because on 3 occasions, the Central Planning Committee agreed with the Parish Council that Crupton has always extended beyond the narrow definition of case officers. Very, very important. From the middle of the site, you will see 8 properties adjacent or close by. Thus, it's not remote, as the officer claims. For those unfamiliar with the site, I will illustrate. I'm the applicant's site. The screen is the centre, but not the whole of Crupton. Behind me is the most recently approved by the committee affordable home. You will agree
that this application is much closer to the centre of Cruckton, but behind me was the one that was also agreed recently as being within Cruckton. Need I say any more? There is a national and local crisis of youngsters trying to purchase a low-cost starter home. Yet in Ponsonby Parish, including Cruckton, no affordable open market home has been approved in the last 25 plus years. A horrible gap in balanced housing provision as required by policy CS11. This gap is confirmed by 2 detailed housing surveys, one done by Shropshire Council in the approved neighbourhood plan. In recent years, many affordable rented properties have been approved. This cross-subsidy scheme was supported to fill the gap in line with CS1 to meet rural affordable need and exactly in line with paragraph 82 of the NPPF regarding an element of market housing. Relevant local policy, the officer accepts is guidance. The excellent housing design reinforces character and identity of Cruckton in line with CS2 Neighbourhood Plan LA2. For 200 years, the Hare and Hound site has been busy with farm, pub, maltings, brewery, function room, big car park, football matches, and has been the focal point and a close relationship with the rest of Cruckton settlement. So this will help revitalise the settlement in line with policy CS5. The landscape impact will be minimal, as you've seen it surrounded on 3 sides by high hedges and trees, and extends no further back than the neighbouring property. Likewise, the heritage asset setting will be minimally impacted as the roadside appreciation is unaffected and there have always been buildings to the side and rear. Thus, this application is supported by several policies of the local plan and in the NPPF, which on balance outweigh any minimal harm.
Thank you.
Case officer's report with respect is well-meaning but presents a misleading picture of our settlement.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Hodges, please? No? Thank you very much, sir. Now calling the local member, Roger Evans, please. Councillor Evans. You have 5 minutes to address the committee, please, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As was said just by the previous speaker, is the site located within Cruckton? It most definitely is. Please read 6.1.8 in your report. Is it the perception of the residents that an area is within that settlement? If it is, then that should override a lot of other things. An interpretation to say Cruckton is a small urban part, which is in the centre and was shown on the original map, is wrong. Some officers have interpreted that anything outside of the urban type of areas is open countryside and not part of the settlement, which is what we have here. This, to my mind, and many others living in rural areas, is a very narrow view. And this is the reason why this type of housing being proposed, affordable housing, is in very, very, very short supply. We need it. Shropshire needs it. Potential residents need it. Will it extend the built form into the undeveloped land? No. Formerly, it was in past times a thriving, popular, well-used public house. It was the centre of the widely dispersed community. I note the words in the report, a fundamental refusal to accept that this is part of that named settlement of Cruckton, and that is really, really the heart of this. Fundamental refusal to accept that there is such a thing as low cost for sale housing is also surprising to myself. I was very much involved in bringing forward the cross subsidy in order to enable people to actually have houses in areas where housing would not normally be built, like this one. fundamental except that a development over 3 miles away, which is mentioned in the report, that will satisfy housing need, again, is a fundamental misconception. There is no communication between the two centres at all. If you look at the main issues that are listed, officers seem to disagree that this statement that is stated about scattered dwellings is wrong. As I said before, read 6.1.8. Also, to use applications as a reason that were agreed or disagreed or rejected 7 or 8 years ago to argue that case is wrong. There is one case in the report at 6.1.15, I think it is, which states that an application was approved by a majority. In my mind, it was unanimous that the members at that time agreed to support an application for a house, even though officers argued it was not part of the settlement. Housing need affordable homes. The challenge is the provision of affordable houses in rural areas. Should they only be for rent, or should they be able to be bought at a reduced cost? They should be able to be reduced at reduced cost. Could say more, but looking at the time, I would note that access is acceptable, and that in the report, it states that a legal obligation to secure a discount would be possible. Is it or isn't it? Planning balance. Brookton, a widely dispersed settlement, and as I said, my memory of committee's decisions on the Central Committee were that they recognised that Crookton was a widely dispersed settlement. I would also hope that whatever happens today at this application, that members do say to officers that Crookton is a widely dispersed settlement, and secondly, that the Hare and Hounds is considered part of it. I'm looking at the future, and if we do not really stipulate to officers what we as members consider to be a widely dispersed settlement, the housing to be built in rural areas will go down to the detriment of the whole of the community, the schools, the shops. We will have a population which cannot look after itself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Any questions, please, Roger? Thank you very much. Can I call on Martin Parrish, please, the agent? You have 3 minutes to address the committee. That's the right end button on the mic.
Thank you, committee, for the opportunity to speak. I think the local ward member and the parish council have set out the case for the location of the site within the community, and I really want to reinforce that the affordable housing will be provided for sale, discounted, as per the MPPF, and they will be secured in perpetuity. The same criteria for the people to be able to purchase will be the same as if they were affordable rent. They will have to comply and satisfy the council's criteria, and that's really where I want to leave that.
Thank you. Any questions, please? Thank you very much, sir. Right, open the committee. Councillor Longby, please.
Questions that are about affordable dwellings have come before this committee quite a few times as to whether it's in a settlement or not. But they've usually been about one particular dwelling with a person that meets the criteria and that doesn't overly affect the location. And what you can see my thought at the moment is this is a little bit big. Whilst the houses along the front there, as the officer said, are sort of built in accordance with the flow of the road, the 4 big houses at the back sort of then make it quite a large development. And so whether it's in Bridlington or not, is then I think that starts to encroach into the open countryside. So I want to hear what the other members say, but I don't buy that at the moment.
Go to the bottom, please.
Thank you very much. Familiar with this site. It's infamous locally. My division is just half a mile up the road, so we travel past it. The Hare and Hounds of Crumpton, it is known as. So I do recognise what the local member says about the nature of a settlement, and we've discussed that a number of times. I'm pleased to see the affordable element here, which is desperately needed across our rural communities to the west of Shrewsbury. From what I can see, is the only way to make these things viable is something such as a cross-subsidy scheme. And looking at the site, although there's houses at the back make me slightly uncomfortable because of their location, not in a linear sort of settlement, it's very difficult to see utilising a site that has been an eyesore and a blot on our countryside for a decade or more, how you can bring that forward. I'll be, like other members, I'd be interested to hear the rest of the debate on this. The one question I would have is I know the affordable houses at the front would be sold at a discounted rate. Is there any mechanism to ensure that they are offered to people with local connections first? Is that something that the committee can do? Should this be minded for approval? Because there's lots of local people who I think would benefit from the opportunity for a property like that.
Thank you. Go to the body, please.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll hear from your housing officer about that point about local connections. But I think that Councillor Potter actually caught the points that I wanted to make. This site is an eyesore, but we need to find a way of getting it developed and making it useful. I do think it's part of the settlement. And I won't go over the old debates that we've had so many times in this committee, but basically, if the parish council says it's part of the settlement, it's part of the settlement. I think that's reasonable. And I do know we have the support of the local member and we have the support of the parish council. And I thought Mr. Hodges from the parish council spoke very eloquently in support of this. So I am a little bit uncomfortable with the larger houses at the back. But on the other hand, if we need that to make it work, then I'm happy to go with this and I will support it.
You like to come in then, but do you? Understand this question? What's your question, anyway?
I think it was.
Oh, it was.
Was it my question about the affordable?
Would you like me to respond now, or do you want me to? There's a number of points being raised.
Okay.
Yes, certainly about that point, but I can talk more widely about cross-subsidy sites. If you,
Okay.
Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, if you do that now. Then.
Okay. So exception sites are for the exception being is for local housing need. The SPD outlines a number of tenures and mechanisms to deliver affordable housing. One of those is cross-subsidy. In this instance, none of the criteria has been met in terms of that cross-subsidy model. The idea is that discounted market dwellings are used to subsidise affordable dwellings, and those affordable dwellings are to be affordable rented dwellings. It doesn't talk about discounted market sale dwellings. So, the market, they're not straightforward market properties. They should be sold at 90% of affordable housing of market value to subsidise the rented. But we haven't seen any costings for those at the moment, so we don't know whether this is a true cross-subsidy site. And going to your point, Councillor Potter, about discounted, yes, it is possible to discount affordable dwellings through a 106 agreement, but this scheme seeks to discount by 20%. But if you're looking at household income in Ponsbury of 41,000 per annum as a medium house income,
the multiplier for that would be what's that, 184. 60%. The maximum you could charge for these dwellings is 164,000. So you'd need to look at what the discount you're applying to household income they need to be able to look in that instance.
Can I just come back a couple of questions on that? So from what I understand from what you've just said, there isn't really a mechanism to allow for within cross subsidy for the sale of affordable discounted dwellings, which is something that we are desperately needed. Affordable rental dwellings is, I'm not saying I'm overly blessed with them in my division, which is half a mile up the road, but there are a number that come available quite regularly. The demand is there for people to get on the property ladder where those properties stay affordable in perpetuity through a Section 106. Interestingly about the income you use for Ponsbury, which I'm this is just finger in the wind, but I would say that the average household income for Ponsbury is going to be higher than other areas. Such in my division, I have Westbury Parish, which is just nearby. How does that play into it? Have you just looked at Ponsbury Parish in terms of those sort of figures and calculations?
I have just looked at Ponsbury Parish, and yes, you're quite correct. It is on the high side, and I've just taken a medium household income as of November last year, and 60%. If you as I say, if you apply a mortgage, a multiplier of 4, the maximum would be 186,000. So it's 60%.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I was thinking I'm reading. Sorry. Yeah, that's okay. Fine for me.
You want to come back, Andy, or you want?
No, I'm fine.
You need more, Helen? You don't need to. Are you all right with that?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers, please? Councillor Parkman.
Yeah, this is a sort of difficult application in my mind. I mean, I'm not concerned really about this the definition of property. I think that this area, this property, does lie within the widely dispersed settlement of Crookham. So I'm not overly concerned with that, but I am concerned with some of the consultee comments to this development, particularly from affordable housing. We just heard an explanation of that, because we don't normally get that level of not supported criticism where affordable housing is concerned. So I just wonder if more work is needed in this prior to it being decided by committee. And I think I'd be minded to look to defer the application.
Okay. Please.
Thank you, Chair. I know the Cloughton area well, and I think we've debated long enough about whether it's part of Cloughton. It definitely is. With the application before us, I think it's good design, it's good access, and it provides much needed discounted dwellings for purchase. I do share members' concerns regarding the shape of the site itself. It would be nicer if that shape was linear alongside the road, as with others. But on the other side of that, I do note that it's going to be behind the redeveloped and altered Hare and Hounds Cloughton House. It'll have a line of houses at the front. I'm not convinced that it will, in inverted commas, stick out like a sore thumb. I think the reason why it's been done is to make sure that it is affordable to build those dwellings. I think just the linear development along the roadside itself perhaps would not be affordable on its own. So although I'm not sure about this application, I am minded to accept it as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, please.
I think for local members that are dealing with very rural locations and the delivery of housing full stop, and in particular affordable housing, is a real problem. And what's echoing back to me from the previous meeting is how do we achieve this, and how many times this committee has gone against officer recommendation, purely trying to achieve that. And it's invariably the case that you can only build affordable housing where land falls into ownership that is acceptable to them. And sometimes, yes, we do have to push the policy hard. So what I'm thinking is policy does need to realign itself. Generally, the decisions of this hard decisions that this committee makes in trying to achieve just that. It seems to me we've got something that's not perfect, but workable in front of us that will deliver for the community. And I do believe that sufficient weight or additional weight should be given to the views of the parish council, the local member, and the general view from of that community. As already stated, the housing needs there. We are in the middle of a housing crisis. How do we deliver in very rural locations? It's only through schemes like this, I believe, as we get anywhere near to to delivery. So at this point in time, although it's not perfect, I would be minded to go against the officer's recommendation yet again in trying to achieve something that will deliver.
Okay. Anyone else? Right. Is there a proposal on the table for anyone? As for again? Okay.
I'll move that this is deferred to deal with the issues with regard to the affordable housing side of things. I am agreeable to the fact that this is in Crookston, and I don't think that is an issue, but the affordable housing needs to have more detail as to how it's going to work, and it also needs more involvement with our own affordable housing department. So I'm going to propose that it's deferred.
Okay. Is there a second of that proposal?
No, I think Caroline.
Yeah. So there's a proposal on the table to defer the application for more work to be done on the affordable housing element. That's proposed and seconded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
You take the vote, please, Kim.
So if you can indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal just sent out by the chair. Caroline Bagnall. For. Andy Boddington.
Against.
Nick Hicknett.
Against.
Richard Huffer.
Against.
Christian Lee.
Against.
Hilary Luck. Against. Nigel Lumby.
Against.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
Got 4 for the proposal and 6 against, so that's
Good.
failed.
So we'll just leave it there and make a.
Seeing another proposal.
We need another vote there.
Another vote.
Councillor Boddington.
I propose that we go against officer's recommendation and accept the application.
Okay, we've got a second for that, please.
We did our reasons.
Councillor Nick.
It's the reasons.
You give the reasons why, please, Councillor Boddington.
Sorry,
Give the reasons why.
that we believe that this delivers development on a site that needs development in a rural area where it's difficult to get housing and it's inclusive of affordable housing.
And you were willing to delegate your 1 and 6 to officers?
Yes, as always, yes, of course.
Is there any way with Councillor Boddington's we could add a bit about the local connection for the affordable? Is that would Councillor Boddington be acceptable to delegating to our officers to work up a condition that local people have first refusal or something? I don't know.
Yes, our officers did, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's for added a bit local to it. Okay.
So the vote on the proposal, have we had to say a second, doesn't we? Oh, second. Okay, so we've got a proposal to go against the officer recommendation and approve the application for the reasons set out by Andy Boddington and the additional delegation to officers for conditions in a section 106 agreement, and part of those conditions to be delegated to officers to include about the local connection. You can indicate whether you vote for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall. For. Andy Boddington.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Henry Wheeler. For. Nigel Lumbey.
Against.
Tony Parsons.
Against.
Ed Potter.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
8 for and 2 against. So that's
Right, okay, that's carried. It's a double the organisation. Okay. They're going to item number 7, Charlton Round Ludlow. Ludlow. Excuse me. No. Laura. Charlton Round Ludlow?
Yes, sorry. I'm back in the room. Yes, this is a site that we went to see, members went to see this morning. The application proposes an extension over the existing first floor terrace to create 2 additional guest bedrooms at this established public house business with restaurant and hotel accommodation. It's a grade 2 listed building in the Ludlow Conservation Area, which has previously been altered and extended and occupies a sensitive location. Members who visited the site this morning will have noted the existing contemporary extension and terrace balconies, high stone cliffs and position adjacent to the River Team and Ludford Bridge. Next slide, please. So that's the elevations as existing from the bridge and at the rear. Next slide, please. And those are the other elevations. Next slide, please. That's the existing arrangement. So you can see the balcony area. Next slide, please. So that's, that's the existing internal where you can see the balcony area. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed where you can see extending over that balcony area. Next slide, please. So that's the elevations proposed. So the scheme involves enclosing the existing balcony area and creating a tiered level above, and would also create a private terrace for 2 existing guest bedrooms. Officers consider that the scheme would not harm the historic fabric of the listed building and would have no impact on the significance of the listed building, and that the character and appearance of Ludlow Conservation Area and the setting of the listed building and adjacent heritage assets would not be harmed. Neither would the scheme harm the residential amenities of neighbouring dwellings, and ecological interests can be satisfactorily addressed by the imposition of suitable conditions as set out in the officer's report. So the officer's report, it's an amalgamation of the listed building consent application and the planning application. So the recommendation is for approval of the listed building consent and that planning permission be granted.
Thank you, Sarah.
Those are photographs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got one speaker on this, Mr. Sean Ward, Ludlow Chamber of Trade. Got 3 minutes to address the committee, sir. Thank you.
My name is Sean Ward. I'm founder and managing director of Ludlow Distillery. The distillery is the home to Ludlow Gin and Whiskey. I'm also a member of Ludlow Chamber of Trade and Commerce. The distillery is based at Ludlow Farm Shop, and we're open almost every day of the year for daily tours. We're an important part of the visitor economy. We're also the home of Ludlow Fine Wines, supplying for just over 20 years the on-trade across 4 counties. Prior to launching the distillery, I was clerk of works and manager of St Lawrence's Church, Ludlow for 13 years, arguably one of the biggest tourist attractions with around 75,000 visitors per year. I'm therefore fairly well versed in the local visitor economy, having played an active role in it for 18 years now. Over the last 40 years, Ludlow, the small quiet town, has embraced the opportunity that tourism brings, and this is really pertinent at the moment with the economic downturn. There isn't seemingly a few months that go by without one of the national newspapers featuring the town as a place to visit. Everyone knows about the Michelin-starred restaurants, but these times have passed. The town is now home to an array of small independent restaurant and food producers. Retailers, on-trade, hotels, producers, market store holders all rely on the vast number of visitors that come every year to the town. I know from my work with the various festivals, the former Ludlow Festival, the Fringe, the Food Festivals, the English Song Festival, and the latest edition, the New Piano Festival, that there's always been a shortage of rooms in Ludlow, especially during the high season. The acting Chief Executive Officer of the Assembly Rooms has made a statement supporting this application I noticed online. Ludlow's economy has no major industry. As a town centre, it's almost wholly reliant on tourism. And that's even more difficult in these times. Most importantly, many hundreds of local people rely on the tourism trade for their employment. Cedric Bosey, the owner, is he's a responsible business owner within the town with 2 successful venues that bring much needed employment and income for many other businesses like ours. The proposed development is clearly within the appropriate development guidelines and has been approved by planning officers. Indeed, it builds on an already sympathetic addition to a listed building and should be commended for doing so. Cedric has transformed both businesses, the Church Inn and the Charlton, from sleepy public houses to foodie destinations that are busy, successful, used by both the local community and visitors alike. Both businesses are housed within carefully restored historic buildings. Conservative estimates say that £25 is spent per person staying in the Charlton Arms, bringing that to £250,000 into the local economy per year. I'd say £25 is a little bit stingy, knowing my customers and what they spend. £50 would take us to more like £500,000. Ludlow has always developed through its history. Freezing it in time and fretting over the ashes of a bygone age will not ensure its survival. I therefore wholly support this. The hospitality trade is under enormous pressure.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Right. Councillor Boddington, do you want to start off?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I do know the applicant, Cedric Bosey. He's a landlord of a pub in Ludlow. It's impossible not to know him. But I didn't know about his application until it arrived on the planning portal, and we've never discussed it. We've had no discussions whatsoever about it. So I'm quite independent of his views. That said, I do support this. I'm very conscious about the architectural history of the town and developing sensitively. I think this is fine in its location. It's not on the street frontage. And yes, you can see it from the opposite side from the social housing very clearly and from Ludford Bridge. So you have those views. But nevertheless, it's an expansion to a business. In town, it creates rooms. And the one thing that's beginning to happen in Ludlow across the whole county, there's recently a report about this, is we're changing from a day visitor economy to an overnight visitor economy. And people come for the weekend or a couple of days rather than just coming in and going back again. Part of that is driven, I'm sure, by the price of fuel, as we're quite away from any major settlement. So that change is happening. We need rooms. And the travel lodge, it's usually booked out from Easter all the way through, and it's booked out all over Christmas. And there's a lap there, and there's lots of smaller venues, but they tend to be full. And there's tremendous demand for rooms. So people do come and stop overnight, but some actually leave the town. and go and stop somewhere else in order to get accommodation. So I think this is a good idea. I think it works well. It's a private terrace, it's not a public terrace as such. I don't think there's any loss of amenity. I think there's a great gain for Ludlow and its tourist economy. And I can see the heritage concerns about it, but I think it passes muster. And I will be supporting this.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Yes, I'm also going to support this application. We visited the site this morning, and there's already obviously been some extension of the original building, and that looks fine to me. It fits in with the original building, and I'm going to support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Potter, please.
I agree. It's planning officers are happy. It meets the listed building elements of this. It'll be good for the economy. It seems sensible, and I'd be happy to propose that we support this application.
Okay. So a second the proposal, please. Thank you, Christian. Proposal and seconded to say they go along with the officer's recommendation. Could you take proposed by Councillor and seconded by Councillor Lee?
So we've got proposal and seconder to go with the offer recommendation to grant planning permission for building consent, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. If you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall? For. Andy Boddington? For. Nick Hignett?
For.
Richard Huffer?
For.
Christian Lee?
For.
Hilary Leff? For. Nigel Lumbey?
For.
Tony Parsons?
For.
Ed Potter?
For.
And David Owens.
For. Thank you. Right, we're now going to item number 8, Euro House, Dale Street, Craven.
Yes, thank you. I think we've just got 3 slides, Tim. The location plan, and next slide. That's the engineering drawings, and the next slide. Engineering drawings, and a recent newspaper article. I think members visited the site earlier today, and this application is to culvert the watercourse which runs through the site. The council's drainage and flood risk manager has discussed the matter numerous times with the applicant and his agent, explaining that the proposal is not acceptable in policy terms. Alternatives have been suggested by the council, however the agent has confirmed that the application as submitted is the only one for consideration. Essentially, the yard is divided into 2 by the watercourse, which you will have seen today. The factory yard and the backyard, meaning that vehicles have to manoeuvre internally between the 2 sites. The site has operated successfully for many years as an abattoir and since 1992, according to their website. So it's not absolutely clear why the culvert has become a problem within the last couple of years. The same proposal was withdrawn in 2021 and refused in 2022. The bridge which is used to get the sheep from the lorries and pens to the lairage, which is the sheep rest area, needs replacing, which the local planning authority has no objections to. However, the applicant also wishes to culvert the length of the brook which runs through the site to increase the hard standing area for vehicle movements and external storage and lorry parking. From a pollution point of view, the applicant has stated that they've not had any issues with detritus entering the watercourse. The watercourse does not form part of the adopted highways or its assets, and there are no proposals for any highway alterations, and therefore from a highways point and transport point of view, there are no objections. Moreover, there have been no reported road traffic collisions or incidents as a result of the vehicular movements at the site. There are no public representations, and Craven Arms Town Council object as the proposal is contrary to the adopted policy. Members are recommended to refuse the application for the reasons outlined in the officer report. However, if members are in any doubt and are minded to overturn the officer's recommendation, the council's drainage and Flood Risk Manager, John Bellis, has prepared the following statement as he is otherwise engaged at the flood risk meeting in Coventry. So I'll just read John's statement now on his behalf. Although some members of the committee may be minded to support this application, they should be aware that the proposals include the culverting of sections of an ordinary watercourse in direct contravention to Shropshire Council Policy CSAT, Sustainable Water Management, and the Local Flood Risk Management Strategy Policy 6, both of which clearly state that culverting of watercourses as part of new development should not be supported. 67 metres of watercourse to be culverted as part of this application may not provide a large amount of ecological value, but the loss of a watercourse habitat is a major concern across the county. And approving this application in opposition to council policy sets a dangerous precedent for future development, particularly in locations where inappropriate development may have a negative impact on local flood risk. The watercourse in question is an engineered channel which receives flows from the system where there are known flooding issues further upstream. Although the proposed development is unlikely to have a significant impact on property flooding, the application has not included any detail of how they propose to convey exceedance flows throughout the site, meaning that the extension of this culvert has the potential to adversely impact flooding on the public highway on third-party land, as indicated on the Shropshire Star article. If we could just go back to that, please, Tim. This shows flooding in October 2023. It illustrates the flooding issues outside the site, and it has not been demonstrated that the additional culverting will not exacerbate this issue. Should the committee be minded to support the application, they should also be aware that prior to any works taking place, the applicant would also have to secure an ordinary watercourse consent from the council as the Land Drainage Authority, as defined under the Land Drainage Act 1991. As council policy clearly states that culverting of watercourses will not be permitted, any application for consent will be refused. Although there is a right to appeal, this decision is set out in the Act. As the council's position on culverting of ordinary watercourses clearly set out in our local flood risk management strategy and is consistent with policy of other lead local flood authorities across the county, the Land Drainage Authority are confident that any arbiter would uphold the council's decision to refuse the ordinary watercourse consent. If approved, it's likely that this application would not be able to proceed on the basis of failure to secure the necessary consent. Clearly, the decision on whether to approve the application contravenes Council Policy 6 with the Planning Committee, but I would ask them to be mindful of the implications of this decision for all future applications in their constituencies, which include the culverting of a watercourse. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the local member, I wish to speak. The history of the ditch and the culvert going back to 1980. This stems back from when the brook in Brook Road was diverted. It came under the railway line, then crossed it under the A49, down across the playing field, and ended up in the field to the north. Originally, the people that did all the work wanted to pipe the culvert from where it entered from the playing field down through here, but the local farmer at the time said no, he didn't want to culvert it or drain a pipe because he wanted his livestock to drink out of the brook going through his field. There was talk originally about putting the pipe straight across the field, so it didn't have any of this at all. It went straight across from the playing field right down to the River Ronnie, so all this would have been dealt with and bullshit. But the end product, we end up with a water course just causing this. This picture here wasn't nothing to do with Euro quality land flooding the road. It was to do with the farmer to the left-hand side, where all the drains and everything is blocked. There's a hawthorn tree in the one pipe, and there's loads of debris and everything else where it goes to run under the road. I've asked the local farmer to clean it out on several occasions, and he hasn't done it. So this is not all down to Euro quality land and the culvert flooding the road. It's all to do with the farmer to that field. I live just up the road on the left, and I see the field flood many a time. But this has only happened twice since I was a child, because I live up there and I pass it every day. Quality Lamb is a good employer. They've doubled their staff in the last 2 or 3 years, and that's why we're asking now to reconvene all the yard, make it more safety, make it so they can get the vehicles in and out of one access instead of going out of two. Apparently they've outgrown their success, basically. They've been that successful in business. And I know other slaughterhouses have closed in the West Midlands. They've taken on the work in the last couple of years, and that's how they've doubled their workforce. This would be an immense value to them, this sort of culvert, this ditch, and they've given a unilateral undertaking to when they move, they will reopen it, because they want to move to Newington Farm. At the moment, they got an application for the lairage to be moved up to there, to Newington Farm, and highways, national highways, are holding the application up at the moment because they say the access in and out to the premises isn't suitable. Quality Lamb also set up a foundation where they give money to charities. They do a lot of local work, in Saving Arms, and I know a lot of people have asked for a donation towards different things from their foundation, and they've been so successful. They support the Discovery Centre, they support the allotments, and they do a lot of support locally. So they do that with bonding. I travel past it, I see up to 3 articulated lorries loaded with sheep parked on that road. Especially in the dark, it's very dangerous. When the gut wagon comes to take away the offal from the slaughterhouse, he pulls up where that car is, the reverses, just drops the unit there, the trailer, reverses into the yard, picks up the full trailer, pulls it out onto the road, unhooks that, has to go back to his unit then, shunting the empty trailer for going to for the offal to go into, then to take it away. We also have a blood collection 2 or 3 times a week, and the articulated lorries have to back in off there. Normally, there's vehicles parked this side of the entrance because there's nowhere else to park in that area. So the lads that work at the butchers there, people working at the Quality Lamb park there, and it's not the easiest of places. But as I say, his business is growing. He's taking on extra work from abattoirs that's closed in the country. 90% of his trade is export. And when he gets his new factory, he's looking at doing cut-ups, further processing to supply this country's supermarkets. Just when they're putting mouthers on, blue tongue and everything else, his export license was closed, so he had to find a market. And he's come through all that, and they've done a fantastic job. So I minded myself personally to support the application because it's a no-brainer. He wants to expand his business. He wants to tidy the brook up from anything that may go on in there. And he also wants one access into his yard instead of 2 accesses. We've got to come out on the A40 onto the B4368, reversing lorries in and shunting. And I say, I've lived here all my life. I pass that road every day to go home, and I've seen it. I've seen lorries parked in the dark and everything else. Where if you have a clear access straight in, do your manoeuvres in the yard, unload the sheep back out, and it's a no-brainer really. So I'll leave the committee to decide which way they want. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you. So I take over the chair on this one. And there being no further speakers on my list, that's correct. Yeah, so I open it up to members for debate, please. Right, Councillor Hafat.
Yeah, it's very interesting to listen to our chair's experience, knowledge of the site and exactly what's gone on. Back to my background, I've got no good reason to hinder any business. We want business to be successful, go forward. And clearly they have done that. And it should be our endeavours to support business wherever we can. It seems that any culverting of this is not going to exacerbate the problem. Indeed, this is on a temporary basis. I appreciate policies are in place for a good reason, but we're losing a small proportion of open brook. And I'm doing my, I'm doing my part as a farmer in fencing water courses off to keep livestock out. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. I've worked straight over Christmas trying to achieve the direction of travel from central government. But there needs to be some flexibility within policy where there is demonstrated there's good reason. So it was interesting to get the knowledge from our chair. I don't always understand why certain policies are in place. I guess they're for a good reason, but I do believe that from time to time there needs to be a degree of flexibility. Whether or not there is any danger of setting precedents within culverting or any other water management system. But at this point in time, my viewpoint is probably akin to our chairs. Thank you.
Councillor Lambie.
Okay, good introduction. The company's intending to move. So they want to move up the road, but it's held back at the moment. But at the same time, they want to put a culvert in. I don't get that. Now, what I took from the site visit is that they want to renew the bridge. But the reality of it is, to shunt their lorries in and round, all they needed to do was ask for permission to have about 4 or 5 metres more of that culvert into a bridge, and then they could have swept the vehicles round. So I'm tempted to think that this is a sort of, they want to use the land. They culvert it over, pipe it over, fill it all in, and then they can park more lorries or whatever. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily what we should be giving them. I am really worried about what was said by the flood officer, that it sets a precedent. In Albrighton at the moment, we've had some flood alleviation work done, which basically boils down to having open culverts holding water up. And I'd hate to think that I was part of anything that was voted that set a precedent and people wanted to pipe over everything. Now, I'm starting to hear a little bit of policies are there to be broken, and that's not the sort of environment I, as a planning committee member, want to be in. I want to back the side of policies, even though we want to have the bend, the flexibility and whatever, but this policy is there for a specific reason. They don't need to culvert all of it. And in regard to the flooding, they could have just removed the tree, which was the problem, because they can get at the tree. If that tree had gone halfway down the full covered over culvert that they wanted, you'd have a heck of a problem getting that tree out. So as such, I doubt I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Bollington, please.
Thank you, Chair. Many of the points I was about to make have just been made by Councillor Lumley. That I am nervous about capping over a waterway and going against policy. I was nervous before, having read the application. I'm even more nervous now I hear it's only temporary. Now, okay, one application is held up by highways. Well, there's nothing new about national highways holding up an application. In fact, it's normal. And there's nothing new there. But really what we're doing is breaking a policy for a temporary fix. Well, I don't like that, you know. If it's something permanent, there might be a stronger argument. But it's not permanent. We're very sensitive about watercourses. obviously after this winter, you ask, everybody's sensitive about watercourses. But I don't think I can support this because it is concreting over a culvert, and it is against policy, and it's quite a difficult policy to go against. This is not an affordable house on the edge of settlement, or in something that people aren't sure if it's a settlement or not. This is sort of fundamental water management, and their policies against it. I think I gave the policies, and I can't support this.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question. Really, I noted in the report that I think on a couple of occasions it said that one of the reasons for the decision that we were being asked to support today was the fact that the applicant hadn't conducted a flood assessment for third-party land. They'd conducted a flood assessment for their own land, but not for third-party land. If they had have conducted an assessment, this is the question, if they had have conducted a third-party land, is it likely that the proposal to refuse would have been altered by that?
No. No, that's just the second sort of it's refusing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Plummer.
Thank you very much. I recognise the importance of this business, particularly in the rural setting and for the wider rural economy, especially agriculture in Shropshire. However, I think there is some fundamental problems here. Even if we were to approve it today, it isn't going to be implemented, is my reading of the planning document 651. So I'm not sure by us setting that precedent for something that wouldn't be enacted. Yes, they could appeal. Would they win on appeal? Who knows? I mean, they could appeal, I suppose, a planning decision, couldn't they? I think fundamentally what needs to happen here is probably this business has outgrown its site and needs to be in a different location within Craven Arms. And I know we have tried very hard through various levelling up and bits and pieces to try and enable things like that to happen. So perhaps some headbanging to try and get the application moving for the additional site would be a better use. And as much as I want to support this, to support the business, I don't feel I probably can, particularly with the outcome that it might not even be implemented. Won't be implemented if we approved it.
Thank you. And Councillor Bagnall, please.
Thank you. This is clearly a well-meaning company with good social intentions as far as supporting local events and charities and so on, which is to be applauded. However, that's not what we're actually here to decide on. I could, on the site this morning, I could absolutely see the sense of, covering over and culverting the stream, but that doesn't make it the right thing to do. And I have to say that whilst our chair did say that he, had known from childhood that particular area and had not seen it flooding more than once. I have to say that, with climate change, we're now seeing events that were once seen to be 100-year events. We're now seeing several of them occurring in a very short space of time, and we can't anticipate what is likely to happen in the future with that regard. So I find, I absolutely understand the reasons behind this application, but I don't think this is the right way to address the difficulties that they're experiencing. So I will find it difficult to support this.
Just ask the planning officer to respond, please, to a comment.
Just to clarify with regard to moving to the new site, so Newington Farm was purchased in 1995, and the application that has been mentioned, i.e. to build a new lairage there, has been determined. Louise, you determined?
Yeah, so the current application was refused, but as in on the intention that it was to come back in. It was the refusal was more
to allow them to come back in under a free go because of the free go going out. So as in, yeah, I know that they are intending. I'm not aware that the application is back in, as the chair did say, but as in, yes, there has been an application. We have been considering it, and you know, I anticipate that it will come back in shortly once the issues around the highway matters raised by National Highways are concluded.
Thank you. I'll come to Councillor Lumley. Just want to make a couple of points myself that I made notes of here. I mean, normally I would fully support any further development of a successful local business, and this is obviously a very successful business. My concern is that 67 metres seems a considerable length of culvert, and I know this has already been mentioned by previous speakers. I think if they come forward with a proposal of perhaps 2 sections of culvert with a really wide gap, perhaps 1/3 culverted, then a nice gap, that would have allowed clearance and blockages, for instance, and made sure the culvert was kept clear. And I think that might have been somewhat more acceptable to us and perhaps to the flood and drainage officer. I don't know. But as has been mentioned again, it seems ordinary watercourse consent would not be given to this. So I do feel that that sort of ties our hands a bit anyway, even if we did feel minded to support. But I've noticed Councillor Lumley wants to speak again, so I'll ask you, Councillor.
I think in view of what's been said, I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and refuse the application then, please.
Thank you. Does anybody want to second that? Thank you. Councillor Boddington seconded. Do you need reasons?
No.
You're okay? Okay, we go to the vote then, please.
Okay, so we've got a proposal and a seconder to accept the officer's recommendation to refuse the application for the reasons set out in the report. If you can indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
Abstain.
Christian Lee.
For.
Nigel Lumby.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
And Ed Potter.
For.
7 and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Do members feel this is an appropriate time to take a 5-6 minute break? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will inform our chair.
No, I do.
Well,
yes,
right.
Should be allowed.
We would have a
PowerPoint.
Or is
Yeah,
it-
David, we're live
again.
Right,
So we don't
right, okay, we're all back and ready to go. Thank you, Nick, for that. Go on to item number 9, which is residential land at east of the private travel mentally. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just draw our attention to the fact that the planning application number for the previous application was wrong on the PowerPoint, and additionally, unfortunately, it's also wrong on that front sheet there. It's be 230414 FUL. But anyway, if we can move to the next slide. So this proposal is for a 3-bedroom dwelling with a detached garage, new vehicular access on the adjacent Lordstone Lane. It's a 2-storey, 195 square metre property, traditional construction, with a slate roof, red brick walls, with a detached 2-bay garage with storage. New tarmac access onto the public highway by a 6-metre wide opening in the current roadside edge. So the site's split from 5 Gravelsbank, which is next to it, which is a small farmstead. The previous outline scheme for 2 dwellings was refused in 2020 with concerns about cumulative impacts, and the refusal was upheld on appeal. You can see the site is blue here. All the previous indications that we recently received is in red. So been a number of developments in this small settlement throughout the plan period, as I mentioned, and Worthing with Shell Parish Council's objective that the current amended scheme is unsustainable in transport terms and would continue to represent overdevelopment. However, there are no objections from other consultees. In terms of the public, there have been 9 comments, 4 for, 4 against, 1 neutral. The objectors are concerned about overdevelopment. The supporters cite the applicant's strong local connections and state that this is natural infill plot at the centre of the settlement. You can see where the blue colour is there, the residential bit is in the northern half, so it's sort of near to, I suppose you might say, a centre of gravity of the settlement. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So, in policy terms, the proposal would lead to further exceedance of settlement housing guidelines for this cluster, which is within a community cluster, and this weighs against the proposals, and it requires that the 5 tests set out in SUNDEF policy MD3 are applied. In this respect, significant weight can be given to the applicant's strong local connections. The site also, as I mentioned, has a good spatial relationship with the existing settlement. Additionally, it has some access to main services and an acceptable relationship to its neighbours. Officers consider the design to be acceptable, and there is a bus service within easy walking distance, although it's not that frequent and it tends to get cut off in the winter because we're quite high up. So the applicant has amended the scheme to take account of discussions with the local member and the case officer, me. Render's been introduced to the front east elevation. If we could just see the next slide, please. We'll just see that on the front elevation, the render with the red brick elsewhere. There is planting proposed in front of the house. That's the previous slide. Additionally, as requested by local member Heather Kidd, the applicants agreed to accept planning conditions ensuring that the developments for the exclusive benefit of the applicant and their family to reinforce that sort of local connection justification. And also the property is lowered by 2 feet relative to existing ground levels, because as you go into the site, there's a slight rise, and that could potentially increase the prominence of the property relative to views from the centre of the settlement. So that can be covered by conditions. So in conclusion, whilst the assessment is finely balanced, it's considered the benefits of securing a local home for a family with strong local connections are sufficient in this instance to justify approval, having regard to the other relevant considerations. So we're recommending permission. Just to say that draft condition 4, the appendix 1 of the report, is now no longer needed because the amended plan has delivered the render that we were seeking. But the two other conditions referred to in the late reps report on ground levels and restricted to the applicants and their immediate family, the benefits would stand if members are minded to recommend approval. So just to quickly look at these slides, so we were looking at the point where the entrance to the site would cross the low hedge, and you'll see that there's a very low ditch just in front of the low hedge. That isn't exactly the same as a sort of ordinary watercourse 67-metre situation of the previous application, and there is a general acceptance that where there are small breaches across the highway verge in order to accommodate private entrances, then that is an acceptable scenario in terms of the council drainage policy. You can just look on a bit further, please. So one consideration is the views of the site, Devil's Chair, the Cypress Nature Reserve, that's where that is. And there's a long distance view, which is intervisible, where you can see the site from the elevated land, and you can see the elevated land from the site. In the previous 2020 decision, the inspector was very keen to preserve those views, and one of the significant factors weighing against it was that a house was proposed on the southern part of the site. That's not the case here. We have a hedge which clearly defines the residential curtilage in the northern part of the site, and the bit to the south of that is a goat paddock, which is not a domestic, and so would not establish a precedent for future residential. Next couple of slides, and that will be it from me then. Thank you, Tim, if I may. So here we just have some local views on the one on the left-hand side shows, right-hand side shows a view down the site towards the access point. The one on the left is the access road opposite the site. The ones at the bottom are views from within the site. The one on the right bottom is the view that you can see the Nature Reserve and Devil's Chair from, and where the retained goat paddock would be. If we can see the next one. And that's, I think, the final slide. Thank you, Tim. So we're looking within the site again. We see the relationship with the neighbours at the top. We see that there's a fairly good standoff of I think 30 metres or so between the edge of the north facade of the property and the nearest neighbour. You know, that's really all I wanted to say. It's finely balanced, but the ability to secure the local connection here is a key facet in the balancing exercise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg. Right, we've got the speakers on this. You go ahead, Chair. Okay, you read that out, please, Chair.
Okay, it's the statement from Councillor Heather Kidd, who's a local member, who says the site history has a number of issues, and the planning inspector turned down 2 properties here, but outlined a number of areas for that dismissal. Those have mainly been addressed and supersede previous planning advice given by a previous planning officer. The overdevelopment of the settlement issue still remains. The parish council is still concerned about the overdevelopment of this settlement. Previous planning applications have altered the character of Gravels Bank, which was dispersed and based on a series of small holdings with small cottages. The number of properties built has also exceeded the target for the ward. None have delivered the type of housing required for the area or as outlined in the parish plan. That outlines smaller 2 or 3 bedroom properties, semi-detached and terraced, and for local people. Your site visit will have shown you that this has not been the case here at all. In the spirit of the wishes of the parish council who object to this application, page 4 of the report, I need the following to be built into conditions if it is approved. Firstly, that the house is dropped in height and the slab level dropped by at least 2 foot. A 1.5-storey property would have been preferable. This would then fit better with the historic houses on Gravels Bank. The height should not match that at the pump house next door. And secondly, that the applicant's assertion that this would be for their family only and was there in a covenant should also be conditioned to safeguard. This would then mean that the parish's wishes for housing for local families would be met. Mr. Hilditch is certainly local, with his father living in the farmhouse behind before his death and his brother also living in Gravels Bank. This site can be considered infill. This is a finely balanced decision for the committee to consider. Material planning considerations to object to this are now difficult to find, but they can only support if the 2 conditions above are included. Thank you.
Thank you. And then another speaker, Justin Schreier, the agents.
Hello.
3 minutes to address the committee, so it's the right hand button on the way. Thank you.
Justin Shirehall, architect and agent. Thank you very much, committee and chair, for allowing me to speak. I'll then be very brief. The applicant, as said by the local councillor, is very local and should be a determinating factor, especially on what's been said about previous applications at Crockton and the need for local people to live locally in local on local land. The application has addressed in detail all the concerns in the previous appeal for the same site, i.e. one dwelling in the correct position and location, so to keep the corridor of view. We are happy to reduce the height of the building, so as to again reduce the impact of the dwelling. We've made all the alterations by the planner Graham has suggested and requested, and I would hope that the members follow the Shropshire Council planners' recommendation and support the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, please?
Short and sweet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to start the debate? Ed?
Yeah, I look at it. I understand what you're saying about a finely balanced decision, but it seems to be a sensible application. It meets with the local members' approval, as long as the two conditions that she's mentioned, which I think has been accepted. It's clearly within a settlement. It seems to me to be clearly infill. I understand about the views from the Cyperstones, which I presume would be on a clear day, not a hazy day, not a wet day. So I would be more than happy to support this and happy to move following anyone else who wants to speak.
I'll be very quick, Chair. I was going to raise pretty much the same points. So Councillor Potter's beat me through it. Just mentioned 6.1.9, which does state that the deeds have a condition for the land to remain within the family. So that seems pretty clear, but we could ask officers to make sure that that is a condition. Just to amplify that, it's obviously infill and it's for a family with a strong local connection.
Okay. Come back, Graham.
If I should just clarify, the application supporting documents did indicate that the deeds had a condition keeping it within the family. When I pressed a bit further, it transpired that that wasn't actually transposed into the legal clauses within the deed, but that it was nonetheless an expected commitment from the estate of the ex father. However, the applicant is quite happy to convert that into a planning condition, and in this circumstance, that condition would meet relevant legal tests.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. If I just come back on that, that's in that case that enforces what I suggested. Thank you.
You're making a proposal, seconded by Councillor Ignat.
I'm happy to second.
And the condition that it stays within the family. Okay.
Was that already?
Second.
Because in the update, it was already in the update, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got a proposal and a seconder to approve the application subject to the conditions in the appendix and the two extra conditions in the late reps, which include that condition about the keeping it local. If you can indicate whether you'd vote for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
David Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Hilary Left.
For.
Nigel Lumbey.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we've got item 10, Small Heath Farmhouse, Ashford Bound Family. Is that you? Sarah, this is Sarah. Making work today, Sarah.
Yes, this application, it's an application for a variation to an extant planning permission for the erection of 12 100% affordable homes approved as an exception site in the Greenbelt countryside on the eastern edge of Cladley.
The amendment sought is alterations to plots 3 and 4. Can we just, next slide, please? So 3 and 4, it's the sort of pinky coloured units towards the front of the site. That's so to alter plots 3 and 4 to increase the accommodation from 1-bed bungalows, which was approved previously, to 2-bed bungalows, and to add photovoltaic panels to the roofs of all the approved dwellings shown there. The only significant impact is the reduction in the total quantum of public open space within the scheme from 686 square metres at a reduction of 22 square metres. However, the scheme would still provide sufficient public open space to meet the requirement under policy MD2, i.e. 30 square metres times 20 bed spaces. The design of the proposed bungalows would be found elsewhere on the approved development. So there were already, the plots towards the rear of the site were already of that design. So those have been approved. And the provision of photovoltaic panels is supported in principle within the policies supporting the provision of renewable energy provision. So the scheme is supported by the Affordable Housing Officer, as stated in paragraph 6.2.2 of the officer report, and supported by evidence of housing need. So when members consider this application, they've got to consider the amendments proposed. Parish Council has raised issues with respect to the loss of the hedgerow to facilitate the access, but that remains as previously approved and was acceptable in the light of the proposed mitigation, and secured. That mitigation was secured by condition. The Parish Council were also raising drainage issues, which were raised previously, and there was a condition recommended to require the drainage details to be submitted and approved. That application for the discharge of that condition is under consideration at the moment. And we would seek to put a similar condition should the committee approve this current amended scheme. The only update is since the officer's report was written, we've had the noise assessment report, the landscape and mitigation plan and the arboricultural impact assessment needed to be amended to reflect the proposed layout. So we've had all of those amended documents in, with the exception of the arboricultural impact assessment. But we're asking for delegated powers because we would need to do a deed of variation to the Section 106 agreement that's on the original planning permission to reflect the change in the house types. Thank you. Oh, sorry, there are some drawings if you'd like to see those next slide. So this is the proposed 2-bed bungalows with the photovoltaics on the roofs. Next slide, please. There's some of the other properties that were approved previously. Next slide, please. That's it. We're back to the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Right, now some speakers on this. We've got Mr. Richard Topham, Parish Councillor Clanley. Come and address the committee, so you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Councillor, there's some information that you haven't seen before.
No, I'm not going to do that.
You're all right? Oh, right. Well, thank you, committee. Thank you for letting me speak, although we've been prevented from actually sending it. Your mic on the right. Oh, sorry. Thank you, councillors, for letting us speak, as we haven't been allowed to voice our concerns about this application when it was actually was an application. This is the 3rd affordable scheme in Clavey Parish. We do not object to the introduction of solar panels, but do object to the housing mix variation and the removal of the southern boundary hedge. The March 23 planning application provided no figures, only in the pre-act for housing need, and this was based on figures from 2022 in February. This variation application in October provided no figures to justify a change in housing mix. Today we have November's figures to support an application made in October. So where is the justification for a variation in October? If we take the housing register figures in Nova as read, that's 8 1-beds, 10 2-beds and 2 3-beds. Although no parish housing needs survey has been done since 2018, the current application provides 6 1-beds, 6 2-beds, plus the 4 2-beds passed by this committee in June. That gives a shortfall of 2 3-beds and 2 1-bed properties. This variation, a shortfall of 2 3-beds, 4 1-beds, and an oversupply of 2-beds. This variation does not improve the housing provision, but it makes it worse. So it should be refused as exception sites in the Greenbelt are for the registered local community need, not future speculated need. You have a hedgerow survey, well, you would have had, which Clavely Parish Council commissioned. I've included the page from the applicant's ecologist, all 3 lines referring to the hedge. We have a 3-page assessment here. Their assessment, the ecologist, I use that term loosely, found 3 species. In our survey, we found 8. This makes it a significant hedge and should be protected. According to the 1997 hedgerow regulations, which classes it as an important hedge, a few ornamental garden trees and a handful of bird and bat boxes will not mitigate the loss of this significant established boundary hedge, which is the entrance to the village. Our report confirms, which we would have liked to have shown you, our planning application objection that this ancient species-rich 400-year-plus hedge should be retained and the site accessed from its northern county highway boundary, which you can see on your map is at the top end of the blue, where you wouldn't need to remove any hedge at all. The PC requests the committee to recommend a hedgerow retention notice be issued to save this ancient important hedgerow, as an alternative access to a county highway is available with no hedge. I would just like to point out a development over 10 houses requires a newt survey of 500 metres where only 250 metres was carried out, and there's no reference to hedgehogs, which is a BAP priority terrestrial mammal species, which would be normally included in any reputable ecological report.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Any questions, please?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can I just ask clarification on the statement that this gentleman made that Parish Council had no notification of this VAR?
They were notified of the VAR application. I think what you're referring to is the original planning application was determined under delegated powers, so it didn't come to committee.
We would have requested it if we had the opportunity, but we had no council member at the time.
Thank you very much, sir. But now whether to bring Mr. Colin Taylor and give him to read next.
A statement from Colin Taylor, local member, who says this development has caused a lot of annoyance to the Clavely Parish Council by the way in which it has been processed, and they feel that their views, comments as consultees to the planning process have been ignored. I was elected at the end of October as the ward member for Clavely after the proposed scheme had been approved as an exception site for affordable housing under delegated powers in May 2023. Clavely PC were not informed that it had been approved until October, even after requesting it to go to committee. I believe with the benefits of hindsight that the scheme/plans should definitely have been recommended for a committee discussion and site visit. One of the reasons was that there was no comment from the ward member. Chairman of committee should have realised that at the time there was no functioning member for the ward of Alverley and Clavely. Clavely PC are not against the provision of affordable homes, but they have not been consulted on the type, mix, local connection for affordable housing. Basing need on the housing register rather than a parish housing needs survey is unrepresentative of the required mix of dwellings and does not take into account other affordable schemes in the parish already permitted in Clatterley. Another cause of dissent for the parish council has been the applicant's ecology report on the removal of the hedge on Aston Lane to allow access to the site. The report is misleading and inaccurate and resulted in consultee appraisal reports coming to the ill-informed conclusions for the hedge's significance. The species indicated in the hedge and recorded is a lower figure than actually exists, so devaluing the hedge's importance. The hedge is actually an ancient hedge and is over 400 years old. Paperwork can be supplied to support this statement, and it complies with several 1997 hedgerow regulations confirming its status as an important hedge. There is actually no need whatsoever to remove the hedge to access the site. There is much better access onto the site from the north side off Damford Lane. This entrance does not require any removal of greenery as its boundary is only a wire fence. An entrance from Damford Lane would reduce the number of access points onto Aston Lane, one of the main approach roads leading into and out of Clatterley, which is very narrow. I urge members of the Planning Committee to seek ways in which this scheme can be revisited and modified to take the above comments into consideration. In a small village, the mix of houses is vital to maintain a vibrant community, and it goes without saying that if an ancient hedge can be preserved when there is an alternative route, then it definitely should be taken. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Right, and now Conor Scott Drummond, please, the agent. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for giving the opportunity to speak. My name is Scott Drummond. I represent the applicant TC Homes and the Housing Association that wants to make the changes. The application is a variation of Condition 2 approved plans on the approved planning application for affordable bungalows and houses. The variation is to amend plots 3 and 4 from 1-bed bungalows to 2-bed bungalows and the addition of photovoltaic panels to all roofs. The new 2 beds fit directly over the existing 1 bed with a small increase to the width. The overall impact of this change is negligible. With the cost of living on everybody's mind, we are looking to achieve a A-rated SAP calculation for the houses, which is well above building regulations. Gas is not available, so photovoltaic panels will supply the tenants with a home that is very cost effective to run. Also, these properties will be connected and wired so that extra electricity generated can feed back into the system. The number of panels have been designed and calculated by the energy assessment consultant to achieve such a high standard. Following recent meetings with the Housing Association that are going to manage the houses and bungalows, they have requested a change due to the requirements they've seen across all their housing stock and developments. They understand the need for 1-bed bungalows. However, they feel the need for space within the bungalow for the extra bedroom. This extra bedroom supplies the tenant with an option of in-house carer or enables family to stay. The extra bedroom also keeps options open for couples to have a bedroom each if they need. This could be due to their health or physical needs. In summary, we're requesting a small variation to plots 3 and 4 from 1-bed bungalows to 2-bed bungalows and photovoltaic panels following the approved full application where all other aspects were agreed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, please? Councillor Lumbie?
Just turn yours off, yeah. Would the change to the 2 bedrooms still be achieved without the loss of the hedge? I don't understand why all of a sudden you have to have a different access point.
Officers to come back on that.
Can you come back on that, Sarah?
Yeah. The issue of the hedge is in connection with the existing extant planning permission.
Oh, right, okay.
There's no proposal to change the approved access.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Bagel, please.
Thank you. It seems to me to make sense to provide 2-bedroom bungalows rather than 1-bedroom bungalows because it does offer more flexibility. A family, the young couple might have children. They might have somebody might want a carer, as the agent has said. I think that makes sense. It's a It seems to me to be a good use of space, and I think the bringing in photovoltaic panels, I think is an important thing and is something that we should be encouraging as a council. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm minded to support this application.
You want to come back, Angela, on me? No. Councillor Parsons, please.
Yeah, I can understand the frustrations from the parish council as to how this has reached this point. But obviously, we already have a development that we've accepted. We as a council have accepted through delegated decision. So then that will have that will set out the entrances and exits and a number of other things there, which I guess we can't now change because that's already been accepted. All we're being asked to do, I think, on this occasion is to check a variation to change the 4 one-bedroom bungalows to 4 two-bedroom bungalows, and two one-bedroom to 2 two-bedroom, and on that basis alone, I would be supportive of that for the very reasons that Councillor Bagnall.
Thank you. Councillor Egan, please.
Thank you, Jay. I do share the concerns. It's unfortunate this application came through at a time when for a certain amount of that period of time there was no local member for that area. But having said that, it's a shame that some of this time has been spent on talking about the hedgerow when in actual fact it's not actually before us to consider today. So unfortunately we cannot comment on that at all. But I do support Councillor Bagnall's comments regarding the changing a one-bedroom to 2-bedroom bungalows, because there could be easily plenty of cases where there might be a carer or somebody might need a visitor to help them for a week or following a hospital appointment or whatever. So I quite understand why they would want to change it from 1 to 2. I think the amount of public open space reduced because of that is negligible. And the black photovoltaic panels, in my opinion, are much more pleasing to the eye than some of the panels that I've seen from previous years. And let's be honest, we're all going to need applications coming forward where all the properties contain photovoltaic panels, perhaps electric charging points. So it's good that this developers decided to put them on all the properties. So I would be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, please? No, can I propose it? Or we have to propose? Seconder, please. Seconder. Take the vote, please, Kim.
Got a proposal and a seconder to accept the officer recommendation as set out in the report, subject to the conditions of deed of variation to the existing section 106 agreement. So if you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall. For. Andrew Boddington. For. Nick Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Hilary Duff. For. Nigel Lumby.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, we go on to the list of scheduled appeals and decisions.
I'll be very brief, Chair. 3 decisions that we have in the documents back. Houses, a 3-house scheme, 4-bedroom detached house outside of Fenfield has been dismissed on the basis that it's outside the development boundaries. So that's good. It supports our policies. An agricultural storage building has been allowed at Ragden. And this is on the basis that the inspector accepted that there was sufficient evidence that the property it relates to formed part of an agricultural holding. And finally, Hope Common, Minsterley, there's a 1-storey rear extension allowed. It's a non-designated heritage asset. Whilst there are concerns about cumulative effects of other recent extensions, the inspector decided that overall the individual extension on its own would not overwhelm or harm the host building. There are 3 also that could be notified, but nothing of particular note there. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Right. I'd just like to thank the officers for all their input today. Thank you for coming on the site with it. We had an interesting afternoon on various applications. Our next meeting is on 20th of February at 2 o'clock. I wish you a safe journey home. But I need to just want to Tony and Ed to give us an update on Pemberton, which has members of the public to leave us in.
Yeah, I'll just finish the live screen share.